Some feelings awaken beneath the skin. Sometimes denial is just part of being human, lying to ourselves, pretending we don't feel certain things. But as you go through life, you learn that the more you refuse to name certain emotions, the bigger they grow, the deeper they sink into you. I'm Alexandra, I'm 64 years old. As a woman, I still have passions. I still need to feel things. But for years, I silenced those needs because that's what was expected of me as a wife, as a woman, even as a grandmother. I kept myself within the limits of what was acceptable, especially after my husband Daniel passed away. Daniel always respected me, he protected me, loved me, but there were things he never really noticed. That a woman doesn't just want to be loved, she wants to be felt. That longing isn't just something you experience when you're alone. It's something that comes alive at someone's touch. When he died, I had no choice but to be alone, but it wasn't just his absence that weighed on me. It was the emptiness inside me, the parts of me that had been left unfulfilled. I tried to keep myself busy. I tried to find a new direction in life, but no matter what I did, nothing filled that deep void within me. And then Otis. I always saw him as Daniel's grandson. When we first met, he was just a child in my eyes. He had always been a little boy. But then he grew up. At first I didn't notice, or maybe I didn't want to notice. In Daniel's final years, I started to feel something different in the way Otis looked at me. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but over time I realized those looks meant something. Back then, Otis was 22. Now he's 27, and I'm facing feelings I buried years ago. For some time now, he's been visiting me every Thursday. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but then I realized it wasn't. It was planned, as if Otis had a reason to be here every single week. And that reason was this house and what this house would lead to. A small accident in the pool that would turn into something much warmer. This place was Daniel's dream, a quiet, peaceful home with a pool, just the way he wanted, but he never got to see it finished, and I never moved in. It just didn't feel right breathing inside a dream that wasn't mine. Without him, it felt impossible. But Otis, he convinced me. This house should be yours, Alexandra. He had told me that day. His eyes deep, unwavering. My grandfather built this for you. You should live here. Back then, I had no idea Otis would be coming here so often, but he was by my side through the entire moving process, helping me unpack, rearranging the furniture, making sure the pool was clean. And now every Thursday he's here. I keep telling myself his visits are just about the house, but somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers that it's something else. Every Thursday I wait for Otis to come. I'm afraid to admit it to myself, but I do. And every time he arrives, our conversations last longer, our coffees stretch out, and the silences between us begin to mean something. Sometimes in the middle of a sentence, his voice drops. His eyes linger on mine just a second too long, and in those moments, something stirs inside me, something I don't dare to name. But I know something inside me is changing. Every time Otis comes here, the part of me that I've silenced for years starts to wake up, and that both scares me and, in a strange way, excites me. But the real crisis is coming this Thursday, and when that day arrives, nothing will ever be the same. Before life takes things further this Thursday, and everything spirals out of control, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. At the end of the story, I'd love to see your support in the comments and likes. Everything I had been avoiding admitting to myself over the past few months had come crashing down on me. Since moving here, Otis's presence had meant so much more to me than I realized. Every time he came, I felt a spark inside me. Seeing him, hearing his voice, watching him smile, it gave me back something I thought I had lost for good. Excitement, the feeling of being young again. That's why the whole pool thing was yet another thing Otis had convinced me to do. At first, I resisted. I had forgotten what it felt like to be this open, this uninhibited. But Otis, with his usual warm and reassuring voice, kept telling me how good it would feel. You should feel young again, Alexandra, he had said. One day this pool is yours. This house is yours. Your life is yours. Why aren't you doing what you want? That sentiment had settled deep inside me because he was right. Why was I afraid to want? And so, every Thursday my little pool ritual began. By 3 o'clock I was already in the water, and by the time Otis arrived at 5, I was long out. It was my moment of freedom, just floating in the water, letting go of everything, thinking of nothing besides the time slot we had agreed on. Under the excuse that Otis would be around in case something happened was really just a silent game between us because deep down, I knew that part of me wished that one day Otis would arrive early and find me still in the pool. And this Thursday it happened. As the cool water wrapped around my body, I closed my eyes. The sun's warmth kissed my skin, the gentle ripples of the pool caressing me. I felt light, free, younger than I had in years. But then my head spun. At first I didn't think much of it. Maybe I had stayed in the water too long. But then the world around me shifted. It was as if the pool had suddenly gained gravity, pulling me downward. I tried to open my eyes, but my vision blurred. I reached out for the edge of the pool, but my body felt heavy. And just then I heard a voice. Alexandra. Otis. He was here, but why? It wasn't even 5 yet. He'd come early. My eyelids grew heavier as the water wrapped around me. The last thing I felt was the cold and then a splash. A wave rippled through the pool. A pair of strong hands grabbed me by the waist. The water shifted suddenly, and then all at once, I felt the sharp contrast of the open air against my skin. Otis had pulled me out of the pool. I lifted my head and my eyes met his. He was soaking wet, his breathing uneven. Sunlight filtered through his damp hair, and I could see the worry in his eyes. But it wasn't just worry. There was something deeper. Alexandra, are you okay? His voice was softer than I expected. I nodded slightly, but my heart was racing for an entirely different reason. Otis's hands were still on my waist, warm, strong, protective, and for a moment, he realized it too. That was the moment we both understood the silent truth we had been avoiding for years. The thing between us, the pull, the attraction we had both pretended didn't exist was now impossible to ignore. Otis's breath hitched. He was still holding me, but he wasn't moving, and I didn't want him to let go. Now stretched out by the fireplace, I tried to steady my breathing, but the storm inside me hadn't settled since the moment Otis pulled me out of the water. The panic I should have felt from nearly fainting in the pool had been replaced by something entirely different. So much so that deep down, I wouldn't have minded if that dizziness had lasted just a little longer because the fear and concern in Otis's eyes had made me feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Attention, real attention. I crossed my arms over my body, hugging myself as if that would suppress the warmth building inside me. My swimsuit was still clinging to me, my skin still damp, and despite the heat radiating from the fireplace, I knew the shiver running through me wasn't from the cold. Otis paced the room, restless, as if he needed to take control of everything for me, and that affected me far more than he realized. I think your blood pressure dropped, he said finally, his voice carrying both relief and lingering concern. He walked over, holding a few salted crackers and a glass of water. Eat this. It'll help. I took them without a word, but my eyes stayed locked on him. His clothes were still drenched, water dripping from his hair onto his broad shoulders and chest. When had he gotten so big, so strong? As he looked at me, he hesitated for just a second before glancing away, but even if he looked away, I'd already noticed something. He had been looking at my body. A shiver ran through me. I shifted slightly on the couch, stretching out as if everything was completely natural, but the tension inside me was telling a very different story. Otis hesitated. He took a sharp breath, his eyes still locked on me. Then, as if realizing something, he straightened up. I'm going to change. Be right back, he said before quickly heading inside. There was a strange excitement bubbling inside me. Normally, when someone left my side, loneliness would settle in, but now there was something inside me waiting impatiently. I wanted him to come back. Minutes later, when Otis returned, he was wearing nothing but a pair of shorts. He tossed his wet clothes carelessly near the fireplace and turned to me. Under the warm light, his body was more defined than ever. Young, strong, undeniably tempting. When his eyes swept over me again, I couldn't suppress the spark igniting inside me. He sat on the edge of the couch, eyes fixed on the fireplace, but when he spoke, his voice was warm again, low and steady. "I'm not leaving tonight." For a second, I didn't fully grasp what he had just said. When I turned to look at him, there was a faint but knowing smile on his lips. "What?" I whispered. Otis turned to me, his eyes meeting mine. "I'd already taken tomorrow off. I was planning to surprise you by coming early, but I guess you were the one who surprised me in the pool." A slow heat spread through me, but this time it wasn't from the fireplace. Otis tilted his head slightly, studying me carefully. "You really scared me, Alexandra." The way he said my name sounded different, softer, deeper. This day, this moment, this feeling, it was heading toward a point of no return, and this time I didn't want to run. For the first time in a long while, the house felt warm. Evening had set in, and yet for once, I didn't feel alone here. There was a presence, a comforting energy filling the space, one that I had been missing for years. Otis's presence, his laughter, his voice. Everything felt like a touch on my soul. We moved to the kitchen and started making coffee. Otis, in his usual effortless way, moved around the kitchen, chatting while preparing the coffee. "You know, Alexandra, I really admire you. If you didn't tell people you were 64, no one would ever guess. Honestly, you don't look a day over 45. I rolled my eyes, laughing. "Do you always give compliments this smoothly? Or is it just for me?" Otis couldn't hold back his laughter. "Maybe it's just for you," he said, squinting at me with a teasing look. Something stirred inside me. His ease, his confidence. It melted away every bit of tension inside me. We sat down at the small table in the corner of the kitchen, sipping our coffee. Laughter-filled conversations, shared memories, him telling me stories from his childhood, me reminiscing about the past. I had no idea how much time had passed. Then, out of nowhere, Otis clapped his hands together. "All right, we're going to starve if we don't do something. Let's cook together." We stepped into the kitchen together and started preparing dinner. Every moment was filled with laughter. Otis teasing me as I struggled to open a bottle of wine, me challenging him with, "Who do you think runs this kitchen?" Every second of it made me feel like I was exactly where I was meant to be. When we sat down at the dining table, the lighting was dim. Otis's eyes kept drifting toward me under the excuse of complimenting the food, but there was something behind those compliments. He wasn't looking at me like just a guest. He wasn't looking at me like just a family elder either. The tension between us was growing stronger with every passing minute. After dinner, we moved to the living room to spend a little more time together. Otis sprawled out on the couch, grabbed the remote, and said, "I think we should pick a movie. Nothing too heavy though. Something easy to watch." I nodded in agreement as he scrolled through options. I sank deeper into the couch, feeling more at ease than I had in a long time. Having Otis here with me made me truly happy. At the start of the movie, the space between us felt normal, but as time passed, as the conversations faded and the silence settled in, that space slowly disappeared without either of us realizing it. Our legs were nearly touching. Every time he turned slightly to comment on a scene, his fingers brushed against mine. And then I don't know who started it. Maybe I turned my head toward him ever so slightly. Maybe he instinctively leaned in as he looked at me. But whatever it was, suddenly our lips met. Warm, deep, and instant attraction. Time stopped. This was something that shouldn't have happened, but in that moment, it felt like the only thing that should. Otis's breath was just inches from my lips, vibrating against my skin. In our eyes, thousands of unspoken emotions swirled between us. I hesitated for just a moment, but as I looked at him, I realized I couldn't suppress what was trembling inside me any longer. "Are you here?" Otis whispered without breaking eye contact. I slipped out of my clothes as the cool air of the night touched my skin. A wave of warmth spread through me. "Yes, I'm here," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Otis slowly leaned back against the couch, his eyes never leaving mine. I straddled him, my knees settling on either side of his legs. As I leaned in, my hands traced his face, fingertips following the sharp lines of his jaw before I pressed my lips to his again. This time our kiss was deeper, more intense. Otis's hand slid to my waist, his strong fingers slowly pulling me closer. His skin was warm, his breath was fast. In that moment nothing else mattered. Just him, just me, and this moment rising between us. I wanted more, and I knew tonight had reached a point of no return. Everything was happening fast, and neither of us was thinking about anything else. I let myself go, sinking onto my knees. At that exact moment, I felt something huge inside me and an overwhelming heat. "Otis, it's been so long," I said. Otis, his body flushed and breathless, responded, "Believe me, it has for me too." His voice faltered as he spoke, and that only excited me more. For the first time someone was this affected by me. For the first time I was affecting someone this much. Slowly moving, I closed my eyes and tilted my head back toward the ceiling. My body tensed. A loud sound escaped me, but I didn't care. "Otis, I'm glad I got dizzy," I whispered, and he answered, "You're never going into that pool alone again. You're too beautiful, Alexandra." My body tensed again, trembling, and Otis, breathless, whispered, "Alexandra, you're incredible. I feel so good." He kept showering me with compliments, and every time I heard one, chills ran down my spine. I leaned into Otis, my lips brushing against his ear as I whispered, "Leave everything as it is. Don't think, don't be afraid. Let it stay inside." It didn't take long for Otis to listen, and he did exactly that. Once again I felt that overwhelming heat inside me. Looking into Otis's eyes, breathless, I whispered, "Thank you." I collapsed beside him and fell asleep without a single thought in my mind. I felt it. Otis was going to be with me from now on. For the first time I was falling asleep with that feeling. If you've made it this far, I know my story has touched you. Don't forget to follow, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about this story so you don't miss out on more. I can't wait to hear your thoughts, and please don't forget to like.